Now, this is our roundtable on clean industrial electrification, transforming every industry. Now, as the International Energy Agency puts it, electricity is at the heart of the clean energy transition, and electrification has become the backbone of the energy transition. But next, and perhaps the toughest frontier to change, lies in heavy industry. So we're talking about steel, cement, transports, chemicals, and even shipping. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I will be joined by a fantastic mix of leaders here, representing so many different parts of industry, bringing a unique perspective to Europe's challenges, industrial challenges, that is. And together, they will look at how to scale clean electrification and also fuel solutions across the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guests. First of all, Florian Reuter, CEO of Deutsche Bahn Energie, the company driving the decarbonisation of Germany's rail network. He is keeping Europe's railways on track towards a net zero future. Florian, welcome to you. Please welcome Philippe Tibi, chairman of the Scale-Up Financing Project at the French Ministry of the Economy, Finance and Recovery. Philippe is a veteran of 26 years at UBS. He now leads the Tibi initiative. Welcome, Philippe. Great to have you here. Natalia Turón is our next speaker, bringing over 2 decades of experience shaping the future of mobility. And Natalia is global head of corporate strategy at SEAT Cupra, where she leads the company's corporate and sustainability strategy. Please welcome Natalia Turón. Okay. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, now José Antonio de las Heras, CEO of FertigHy, a bold new player transforming Europe's fertilizer industry. José Antonio, welcome. And next we have Mika Korja, who is from the industrial partnerships at Fortum, bringing the clean power producer's perspective. Welcome. Fortum is one of the largest producers of carbon-free electricity in Europe, based in Finland. Mika, welcome to you. Welcome to all our guests here, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's begin by actually setting the scene and understanding how the sector is doing. So many different sectors, of course, represented here. And what exactly is the electrification industry doing? Why is it so important? What are the biggest challenges? I'll start with you, Florian, because I understand that rail is one of the pioneers in electrification. Just tell us what you're doing and how challenging it is, or not.
So, absolute pleasure to be here, Maria, part of the conference, part of this panel. So indeed, rail has been electrified for over 100 years. So our oldest power plants go back to hydropower plants in the south of Germany in the Alps. Rail has been electrified very early on, and we've been pushing this from south to north over the past 100x years. But it is still a challenge to actually electrify every little piece of it, right? Rail, logistics, transport is an important element in all of the, let's say, life cycle analysis of any physical products. It plays a role there. So I think, decarbonizing the transportation sector, including rail, is a key element to actually decarbonize everything that we produce in terms of physical products, and that's why it's important to start with rail. We have a very high degree of electrification with rail already. In Germany, so Deutsche Bahn is the national railway carrier in Germany, and DB Energie is the energy utility, so to say, to support everything around energy for Deutsche Bahn. So we are operating 8,000 kilometers of electricity grid dedicated to Deutsche Bahn specifically. We are procuring more than 15 terawatt hours of electricity every year, more than 5 terawatt hours of gas, and 350 million liters of diesel. So you can already tell by the amount of gas and diesel that we're still buying that there's some way to go.
But the speed at which you're electrifying, has this surprised you?
We've had a solid, let's say, portion of electricity already in our mix for a very long time. But obviously, we're trying to not just buy any type of electricity, but actually buy renewable electricity. And this transformation has taken a long time because we've been, known in the industry for very long-term PPAs, power purchase agreements. And sometimes we have PPAs with, large conventional power plants, coal power plants, for example. So we need to wait for these contracts to run out. So the transition has been going on for quite some time. We have now reached a renewable share in our electricity mix of about 72% overall in the entire portfolio. In the high-speed railway network between the cities, the ICEs in Germany, we have been 100% renewable since 2018, and our customers actually expect that of us.
Okay.
So for us, it's part of the DNA to be the most climate, let's say, friendly means of transport. People expect that from us.
People expect
and we're pushing hard to increase that to 100%. Our aim is to be 100% renewable by 2038. We're at 72% now, so there's still some way to go. And it's getting more and more difficult, but I'm happy to explore later.
Absolutely. Florian, thank you very much indeed. Philippe, I'm going to jump from you and come to you later. We're going to go from rail to automotive to Natalia. So, of course, we all see the end result, the electric car, but just set the scene with the whole industry and everything that surrounds, with the electrification of an electric car, because, of course, there's so many other parts to that ecosystem and the challenges that you're seeing.
So actually, in the automotive industry, we are really facing right now the biggest challenge we have faced so far in our history. So we are transforming our whole business model within a decade, and we are facing a lot of different challenges. From the regulatory environment, going through the increasing costs, also the gaps in the charging infrastructure, very important for electric vehicle. As well as the increasing global competition, and of course the need to reskill our capabilities and the know-how of our workforce are really crucial elements at the moment that are for us on the table. We are sure we can manage really successfully this transformation, and we're doing big efforts to do it. So actually, in terms of transforming towards the electric vehicle, in my country, in Spain, together with the Volkswagen Group, we have dynamized an initiative called the Future Fast Forward project that aims to transform the Spanish country into an electromobility hub. So this project consists of the whole automotive ecosystem in Spain. So from us OEM, that we are the tractor project of the car vehicle, is the tractor, so to say, of this initiative, but covers the whole ecosystems of suppliers, component suppliers, partners, and so on. So in total, as group, we are moving a total amount of investment of 10 billion euros. That is the biggest amount so far invested in our country with an industrial scope. Mm-hmm. From these 10 billion euros, 7 of them are invested by the Volkswagen Group, and from my company, SEAT, we are at the moment investing 3 billion euros with the scope to transform towards the electric vehicle. All in all, for us, it's essential really to face these challenges and to make the electric vehicle success in Spain. Mm-hmm. We are a second OEM producer, car manufacturer in Europe. We want to stay there. We want to keep that position in Europe. Therefore, the importance to transform towards electrification. We are confident in our ability to meet the challenges ahead, and we think we are moving in the right direction.
Excellent. Great to hear that. So Spain is the second car producer, electric car producer in where? In Europe, or?
Car manufacturer in Europe are the 9th in the world.
Amazing. Excellent success story. All right, José Antonio, let's go to the world of fertilizers and just help us understand what's happening with the electrification of your industry and the challenges you're facing.
Okay. No, thank you for the invitation. Well, FertigHy is about electrifying fertilizers. Today, fertilizers are produced with natural gas. So we have now the opportunity on one side to decarbonize. We are one of these hard-to-abate sectors. And at the same time, Europe produces electricity, but we do not have natural gas. So it's also a matter of sovereignty, not to depend on fossil fuels. To give you a little bit a sense of the size, in our case, we required a facility with 250 megawatt grid connection. I like to mention that because one of the challenges of electrifying is there is a huge competition about the access to the grid and how to do the planning of the grid, because there are many projects and there is some uncertainty in the market which projects will connect first. So one of the first things about having access to electricity is having access to the grid, which is something you cannot take for granted. The second thing I would like to mention is about the amount of electricity. For example, in our case, we are speaking about 2 terawatt-hour a year of electricity. This could be an invoice of more than 100 million euros every year of electricity. And when we say we should have access to affordable electricity, in the case of the chemical industry, it's not just renewable energy, because the problem is we need a base load. So it's the price of a base load and not necessarily the price of just solar or wind and so on. So for us, it's very relevant if we want to electrify, which is the price, how affordable this electricity is, assuming the industry needs a base load.
And José Antonio, just very quickly, where are your factories? Where are you producing this fertilizer?
Okay, we are developing a first project in France. One of the reasons we moved to France is because they have a very low carbon grid, carbon footprint. So basically, we can source the electricity from the grid, and because of the mix between nuclear and renewables, we can have access to a base load of low carbon electricity. Okay, so we are located in northern France, and we'll have a first facility for 500,000 ton fertilizers, which represent an investment of about 1 billion euros.
Very interesting. All right, let's go to you, Mika. So from a producer's perspective, just set the scene for us. What are you seeing? What kind of contracts are you seeing? And do you think that Europe can, just realistically deliver the volumes of clean electricity that's needed to power industry?
Thanks so much for the question. I come representing Fortum. We are one of the largest Nordic energy companies, clean power companies to say, generating roughly 46 terawatt hours of electricity per year, and we build more as we need. So I think that comes to the question of how to power Europe. Our thinking is that we are demand-driven, meaning that as we see new demand manifesting, we'll push the button and build more. And that's sort of the way to think about it going forward. We have quite ample opportunities to build new wind power, for example, to the Nordics. We operate mainly in Finland and Sweden. That's where most of our assets are. And then we can supplement those projects with our baseload generation capacity, those being nuclear and hydro fleets. Mm-hmm. And what we see quite often happening, I come from the team that focuses on industrial partnerships. And what we mean by partnerships, it can mean many different things to different people. For us, it's really understanding the client needs. Mm-hmm. I think we traditionally come from the world where power companies were also just waiting for projects to pop up, clients to come and ask for electricity, but now we want to understand the client's needs far better. We want to understand what type of electricity do you need. Do you need it 100% of the time? Do you need it 24/7? Maybe can you flex a little bit, say 5% down somewhere, suddenly the most expensive hours of the day are cut out, etc. So that's to say that we can build more as the demand comes, and we really want to be working far closer with the clients than we probably did in the past.
Good to hear. Thank you very much, Mika. All right. We go to you now, Philippe. You've heard, and of course, what they've said, the different industries represented here, and you know the sectors very well. But from an investor's point of view, is there confidence? Is there money to invest in electrification of industry?
Well, it depends. First, as a caveat, I'm not an energy person, but I can talk about growth financing because that's where I come from. And in France, we set up a scheme to provide financing to tech venture, tech growth funds, which, as you may know, is a very scarce, comes in very scarce quantities. I think there are actually two different kinds of projects. One is what we heard coming from developed companies or very developed companies, where the question is about, and allow me to say that it's more about project optimization, project financing, and to find the right execution and make the best use of the balance sheet of the company. While I think a lot of the challenges in energy and electricity are based on new technologies that are untested or that are prototypes, and where you are talking about venture building and creating companies, which I think is the business of Energie. And I think that is much more difficult, because then project finance plays a very small role. It's much about equity. Without equity, you don't have debt. And for that, and we may discuss that later, we don't have a lot of sources of capital. So we have a number of, we are in deep tech. And in deep tech, in Europe, we are good at early stage. But when you come to the point where you want to raise 200 million, 300 million or more, which for an industry is a kind of standard size, in equity, then it becomes much more difficult. And I don't know how much time you want to give me on that.
No, if you could expand on that. Why does it become more difficult when I believe that you said 200 million at that next stage of funding? Is it the visibility? Is it not understanding? Is it, as we had mentioned earlier, the duration of the project?
Yeah, there are elements. One is purely mathematical and I would say arithmetical. It's quite simple. If you want to write, even if it's a syndicate, if you want to write a check of 100 million, which is not big for a large project, it means that your fund size must be at least 1 billion. Okay, so who is managing venture funds over 1 billion in Europe? Probably 10, and they are not energy specialists. So the people that have the physical capability of writing the check, even if they understand the business, is quite limited. And then you have the issue of the time horizon of these funds. Because as you know, the time horizon of a fund is 10, 12 years. If you are talking about projects that have a very long J curve, where you see positive cash flow in year 7 or 8, with a degree of risk, technology risk, execution risk, market risk, regulation risk, it is very difficult from a risk-reward standpoint. So that is the second element. And the third element is the reason why you don't see a lot of big funds is twofold. One, to run a big fund, it is necessary that you have run in the past a smaller fund. So it is a young industry that needs to grow up step by step. And the second element is that if you are the so-called LPs, i.e. the long-term investors that give money or that invest money in these funds, they are very conservative. They don't like deep tech. And if they invest in a deep tech funds, the person that is invested in a deep tech fund that doesn't perform does not have a career anymore.
That's a big decision to make for that person.
That's why it needs to be, and if we talk about solutions at some point, that's why you need a collective, a collective exercise. And the last thing I would say before we can move to other aspects is that this is the reason why you need a lot of public money in energy project. And that's difficult to hear at the time when it's so constrained. But we are talking about infrastructure that are vital to countries, to the welfare of the citizen. So I don't see a better area where public money has to be invested.
Thank you so much, Philippe. You make some very interesting points. I'm sure the audience agrees. Florian, I see you nodding there. What are you thinking?
I wanted to quickly elaborate on this, because I think the general scheme that you described around venture capital, private equity is true. What we perceive from an industry perspective, we don't operate power plants ourselves. So we are an off-taker, of long-term PPAs, PSAs, power purchase agreements or power storage agreements. And we don't perceive a lack of capital, really. It's like we are being offered more projects that we can actually consume as Deutsche Bahn right now.
We're in the right sector then.
However, not all of those projects are profitable to us, right? So we have to justify if we buy green electricity there is, let's say, a slight margin which we're willing to pay a premium on, but not significantly. So we're always kind of looking at the PPA that's on offer, comparing it to what are the current electricity prices on the stock market, on the EAX and the electricity markets. And then we take a decision on whether it's a good offer for a photovoltaic PPA or an on or offshore wind PPA. And we see certain cycles on this. So sometimes if the margin expectations are too high from the investors, for example, we don't do solar PPAs for a while because they're just too expensive compared to our alternatives. We go more into wind. And so we see certain cycles there. And that is, to me, working quite well. I think the problem is more that more often than not, the current market is still cheaper than a long-term PPA with green energy. So I think we need to talk about the framework that is in place. If you ask me, the CO2 price is still too low for us to make the right decision every time. Ideally, we would get to that point. But we're getting better. So I think, José Antonio, you mentioned the fact that we actually need base load. We're in the transportation service industry, right? So we can't tell people, well, electricity prices are high right now, the train's not running. So we have to procure the energy when the train is running. So we don't have a choice. And we need our electricity procurement to follow our load curves. And what we see now is that more and more of the PPA offering companies are actually trying to get to as close to base load as possible by, for example, co-locating big battery storage with a photovoltaic plant, or even including wind into the mix. So they're actually structuring their own portfolio in a way to offer us base load, which of course has a much higher value to us than if we were to just simply procure a solar PPA, for example. So that's kind of the mechanism that's behind these things.
Thank you, Florian. I want to move back to you, Natalia. You mentioned investment of 10 billion euros, I believe, but just more broadly, the investment that you're seeing into your sector, and also whether customers are really willing to pay that green premium.
So actually, the decision for going for this project that somehow is built of, the aim of the project is to build a complete new family of urban electric vehicles fully produced in Spain, okay? And this project, all in all, was representing this amount of 10 billion euros. Here played also a crucial role the support of the government and the administration of the country. So they supported this initiative in terms of using certain fundings, methodologies, subventions, where also they are from the governmental point of view, supporting the industry and pushing really to make this happen in order to support the evolution of the automotive industry to turn Spain into an electromobility hub. So it means, here, this investment was, I want to say, for sure was not totally given by the government. A small portion of that was supported, but somehow this helped a lot in order to take the decision for the Volkswagen Group, the group we belong to, as CATC, really to make this project happen in Spain.
Thank you so much, Natalia. José Antonio, what demand are you seeing for your fertilizers, and who are your customers, and are they willing to pay more? Who's funding this as well?
Okay, so what we are targeting are food and beverages companies which have declared voluntary targets to reduce specifically Scope 3 emissions, which are related to the raw materials they acquire. So these companies have publicly, some of them, committed to these emissions reductions, and after analyzing several paths, they understand that one of the paths is to really source low carbon mineral fertilizers. Okay, so basically, what these companies are looking at are what are the long-term prices for fertilizers, and they need to include into the equations that the fertilizers will start paying for CO2 emissions. Okay, from next year, the European emissions trading system will start charging on CO2, and right now there was a volatility related to the gas prices, but in the future there will also be a volatility related to the cost of CO2, which were mentioned before. So it's not the same if the CO2 price is 75 euros or is 155 euros. So by not having to pay for CO2 because there is no CO2 content, you are basically hedging your future prices also for the fertilizer. So long term, it could be the case that the low carbon fertilizers are at the same cost and there is no no premium, or that this premium is affordable because of the benefits they expect.
Thank you, José Antonio. Mika, what are you seeing with regards to who's funding, where people are putting their money, and are you seeing any long-term commitment from customers?
Definitely. There are some of the most exciting projects that we've seen are actually locking in their electricity PPAs, the power purchase agreements, for decades.
Decades?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and some of these projects might be scale-ups. So we have one industrial partnership, for example, in Finland that is still in feasibility study phase, but it's with Rio Tinto, Mitsubishi, Siemens, us, Tesi. We are all trying to bring our own industrial expertise into the project, and we are the energy partner in this project. We're trying to build the first greenfield primary clean aluminum site built in Europe in over 30 years, and that's something that will be there for decades to come if the project manifests. And certainly it would require some very long-term commitments, from the PPA side as well. So that's just an example for like a 7 to 8 terawatt-hour project that we are planning right now with other companies as well. And I think that's really exciting.
Yes, excellent. Philippe, just if you could comment on that, does this inspire you when you hear about what's happening there?
I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing of is describing situations where you come with companies that are out of the woods and that have a product that is at the maturity where it can be delivered, and the problem is to finance the working capital or making sure that with the combination of off-take, subsidies, and so on, it can work. What I'm worried of are the situations where you are talking, just to give an example, for instance, is nuclear SMRs or fusion, which are really deep tech, and where you have the perspectives are immense if you are talking about fusion, and even for SMR, which are replacement for gas, which can be very effective. Then you are talking about products that don't really exist, that are not operated, and where the funding or the financing requirements are very big.
Okay.
And what I see in Europe, and in France, because we have a few of that, is that at the level where they have raised 150, 200 million, then it becomes extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. And if the state doesn't step in, it is impossible. And you can find that, outside of energy, in computing, in quantum computing, for instance, you have exactly the same, very interesting issues in terms of, I wouldn't say changing the world, but really it's a new paradigms with a lot of productivity which is associated, where it's very difficult to find pure equity. So people have to be not only imaginative, but also have a blend of different sources of financing. An example I can give is the case of Verkor, for instance, which is
which company?
Verkor, which is a startup, if you want, but it's a subsidiary of, if not a subsidiary, they are close to Renault. It's a giga battery, where most of the value chain, by the way, is not European, but where to put that on scale, you needed long off-take contracts, subsidies, co-invest by the French government. And because there is, look at what has happened to Northvolt. Northvolt raised 10 billion, was supposed to be the champion of Europe of giga batteries. Chinese machinery, very cheap electricity in the north of Sweden, and they failed.
Yeah. Philippe, I want to come back to you on this point and to also bring what you're saying into the question of whether Europe can actually keep up, but just hold that thought. I want to come back to you, Florian, because you already run your own traction power grid, I believe, and just what more upgrades would you need? How do you scale up?
So I think there's a clear trajectory for us to increase the amount of renewable energy that we bring to our mix, right? And I think we need to distinguish between what industry, what sector are we actually talking about. Some sectors are already cost competitive today, being renewable, that's being electricity produced by solar, wind, including today's CO2 prices. We are seeing that it can be cost competitive today. So I don't think there's, let's say, additional government support required or public funding required in that sector. I would love the CO2 price to be a little bit higher, so it's the better choice more often, but it already is often enough. So we are increasing our amount of green electricity here by market forces, which is great. But then, of course, there's other sectors, like, for example, if we talk about rail, passenger transportation on the high-speed rail network is 100% renewable energy already, fully electrified, because all of the corridors are already electrified. But then you have, of course, more remote regions where there's less population, less demand, so it doesn't make sense to electrify all of those tracks. So sometimes, in Germany, we have about 15% of all trains are still not running on electric.
50%?
15,
1.5. Okay. Not
of
bad.
all trains in general. And those are still running primarily on diesel. So now we need to look at alternatives for diesel. How can we get away from diesel? The good news is that you have different options. You can electrify the route. If that makes sense or not depends on the demand you have, whether that investment is justified or not. You can use battery electric trains, which we are already building the infrastructure for. We see first projects coming into real operations today. We see a lot of prospect going forward. And the third option is hydrogen trains. Also, it's a mature technology. We can already point to pilot projects running for several years. Again, we provide the infrastructure, the refilling station, the procurement of the hydrogen, and all of that. But we can already see, for example, that in this example, the battery electric train is beating the hydrogen train on a cost economic.
Battery is beating hydrogen.
Battery is beating the hydrogen train, very similar to what we see on the streets, right, with cars, with trucks already. So most of our demand side comes for the battery electric trains, actually, much more than on the hydrogen. So hydrogen works. Technologically, it's mature enough to be a product, but it's not cost competitive at this stage. And so we're pushing the battery electric trains on the regional side, just because it does not make sense to electrify every route. And lastly, the last bit that we still need to fill going forward is the heavy-duty cargo trains. We don't have the battery technology, the power density, the energy density yet to actually electrify that as well. But I'm hopeful that we will see a continued development of the battery technology in order to also get us there. The only prospect right now really is hydrogen going forward to fully decarbonize. On the short term, we can replace diesel, for example, with hydrated vegetable oils, HVO 100, for example. There's legitimate critique around using that. At the same time, I believe we are in a race to decarbonize as fast as we can, and this is a way to cut off between 80 and 90% of CO2 emissions right away, because it is a full equivalent to diesel. Mm-hmm. So I believe it's a legitimate interim, a bridging technology, until we have phased out the last of the diesel trains in our portfolio. So I'm very hopeful, but as I said, I think we need to look at the different applications very distinctly.
Mm-hmm. Natalia, to you, the automotive sector, how do you scale up? What funding, what investment? How do you do it?
So actually for us, scaling up is crucial. So especially seeing how the current figures of the electromobility in the car park actually in Europe are. So at the moment, we are not where we are supposed to be in order to fulfill the decarbonisation goals, the CO2 targets that were defined by the EU Commission. So therefore, scaling up is essential. We need more volume. We need more adoption from the customers towards the electromobility. And this will, on the one side, will also stimulate, because everything is at the end of the day connected, so it will also stimulate the expansion, for instance, of the charging infrastructure, which is also at the moment not enough in general in Europe. In some countries it's better than others, but somehow at least at the moment not enough for covering the future needs.
Why is it taking so long? Sorry to interrupt, Natalia. This is such a big issue. I know in my country, definitely.
At the end, is every country sets own rules regarding allowance, certifications, permissions, for building and putting in service the charging infrastructure. So in every country is different. and it's not easy. So especially in Spain, as we know it, as for instance, so the change of permissions, allowers, certificates, and so on that is needed for an investor to get before installing and putting in service the charges are so long and so high that it does not somehow stimulate the appetite to invest on it.
Permitting takes much longer than building.
Yes.
So for us, it's like 7-8 years of permitting and 1 or 2 years of building.
Permitting to get permission.
To get
Yes.
the permission
Really,
to
that takes
actually
time.
build a new electricity,
In
line
Spain, for
or
instance, we are talking
charging
about 2
station
years.
Why?
From the moment
sign the
you
paper.
decide, you start doing the process until
Really?
you get the charger installed. It could take, now it's getting better, but unfortunately so far it was really a very long period of time. And for sure this doesn't support somehow then the ones that want to invest on it. And for sure it also does not support the customers or the market to be stimulated enough to go for an electric vehicle. So this is the
Interesting.
truth.
I want to go to you, José Antonio. How would you scale up FertigHy, and how would you convince Philippe, or his customers, the people that, his investors that he works with?
Okay. Well, when it comes to electrification in the industry, you have different type of profiles. On one side, you have corporations which have a brownfield running business, and they really need to look at what's the profitability of these decisions. In our case, we are a greenfield developer. It's a scale-up, which was founded 2 years ago. And really, what we see is a difficulty having access to the equity, not so much at the time of the constructions. We see a lot of interest for big infrastructure funds to deploy hundreds of millions of euros. Once everything is in place, the price of electricity, the total capex, and so on. What we see is a challenge now, where to get the money, the funding for these development expenses, okay? So in many cases, it also takes us at least 3 to 4 years from an idea to having something ready to build. And during that time, we are not really the preferred bride for the dance, because at the end, there are a lot of risks associated to dealing with a scale-up, where, for example, we are signing a PPA. Probably it's easier to sign a PPA with Deutsche Bahn, which is an existing company, and not a scale-up. So in many cases, really, there is a need for de-risking, not only to have some equity, but also to de-risking the counterparts about the PPAs we are trying to sign, about the grid connection we really need to confirm and start paying, to order critical equipment really to be able to build the projects in 3 times. Sometimes you have to do advanced payments. So in terms of support, we believe, I think, public entities should not only think about direct funding, but also how to de-risk certain commitments these scale-ups need to do during these 3 years.
And José Antonio, in our case, it's easy because if we commit to a PPA of 20 years for a photovoltaics plant, we are government-backed, right? So we are 100% state-owned. So the project developer then has, the offtake is secured. So he can go to his bank, and then the bank will say, okay, I'm happy to finance, with debt, cheap debt, your construction of this photovoltaic plant. So he comes to us before he even, builds the first PV module, or, applies for the grid connection and so on. So if we are committing to the demand side to offtake his end product, he can get his financing. So I believe in your case, it's more difficult than that because you don't have firm commitments to offtake your final decarbonized fertilizer just yet, right?
In fact, there has been a lot of discussion about public funding schemes. And for example, some companies have not signed the grant agreements of the public funding they got. There has been some questioning about the seriousness or the maturity of the project. But I think that really the uncertainty is about the market. You can have a very solid project, but really the uncertainty is not so much about what these companies are doing. It's about this willingness to pay, the offtake agreements, what will happen in 2 years, will companies would like to be early adopters or not. So basically, you cannot transfer the risk to the scale-ups because they are doing their job. I think it's more about how can we navigate in this uncertainty in the market, where some of the regulations, like RED 3, have not been implemented by the member states. So if the member states are not implementing, so no one knows really if the market will come or not. And so you cannot, on one side, expect that this is really written in stone, that the projects will happen, and at the same time, the market is not 100% clear it will come.
Thank you so much, José Antonio. Mika, I see you nodding away there. What are you thinking about these challenges with permits, with funding, with visibility?
No, but I think it was really spot on that how to de-risk these projects to help them get to the FID level, how to get them scaling up. And that comes down to a couple of different factors, at least from what we see in our world. Number one is having electricity that you can rely on, stable source of, if it's a PPA, potentially it might be base load, there might be some flexibility elements there as well that, we can help out as the energy partner. There's a site. That's actually surprisingly difficult in many areas of Europe, having a commercial site that has a grid connection. And that's something that, we've been, for example, doing quite a lot in Finland with Fortum. So we have a team that looks at commercial site development and tries to link them to the grid to help go-to-market times, hopefully by a couple of years even. So there's the electricity side, there is the site, then you need to probably have something about the technology as well. It has to be proven technology. That is something that investors are increasingly looking at, that how sure are we that this project will fly. So I think those three things are something that we see on a daily basis, what companies are not necessarily struggling with, but what they are trying to get right and will help insofar as we can.
Very interesting, Mika. I want to go back to see what kind of support the EU is giving. What regulatory framework is there, Philippe? Is this encouraging investors or is it deterring investors?
It's a tricky question. I think obviously it's better than nothing because you have a number of sources of funding, you have a number of schemes, you have a number of speakers speaking about the direction. So that's fine. What I read, and you read the Draghi report, so it's not me. Draghi report tells you that it's a bit opaque, difficult for the project holders to find their direction.
But what is opaque exactly? Surely there's a business plan, there's a trajectory. Why is it so
where do you get the money? What are the schemes? And okay, so I think we are not going to dress up the Commission here, but if you compare to the US or to China, because that's really the competition for us in Europe, they have an industrial policy, which is pretty clear. They state what they want, and they have agencies that implement it. They have the funding, which is very clear. And there is one leader. I know in China, they put that on paper. So we did not read that in the West, the Made in China 2025. But they said what they wanted. That it is public money that go to venture capital funds, and it is unlimited, provided it is a direction. And you don't mess up with the Chinese Communist Party. Okay, so if they want something, they are going to do it. They may fail, and they failed. In semiconductors, they failed. But in the energy, if you look at PV, solar panels, if you look at, electric cars, if you look at fast trains, they delivered. So I think, it's quite straightforward, and everybody knows. And it's a question of execution. It's not only a question of money, but it's a question of execution. If you go to the US, if only the Inflation Reduction Act, which was really a big bazooka, since bazooka is the popular word in EU language, of a lot of money, which was subsidies, grants, co-investment, and so on. So know where you are. So I think, it's the problem for me as a non-specialist in commission is that it looks like a jungle,
A jungle.
A jungle forest.
What does?
Where do you start? Do you know people?
Okay.
And then, as you said, you have the local and jurisdiction or the local regulation that add up. So that creates the uncertainty. that the Draghi report is alluding to.
But just for clarity, what looks like a jungle? The regulations that the EU is bringing?
The regulations, but the sources
framework.
of funding. When I had prepared for the meeting, I looked at the various schemes. There are 2 or 3 schemes that look at the renovation of public buildings, for instance, where different sources of money, different directorates, and so on. So, okay, so it's better that you have funding than not. But again, I think in our situation in Europe today, where we have very strong competitors that are not particularly friendly, we need to do better. And I think,
That Europe needs to do better, that's what you're saying.
I think we need to get our acts together, and we need to have, when I was in the army, there was a saying that says, okay, one mission, one chief, and what do you need to do that? Okay, and that's quite simple. And the army sometimes is a bit
I think
simplistic.
Florian disagrees.
I don't disagree.
Oh,
I
you agree?
I agree. I think what we need is more determination, because what you described by the Chinese government or what the Americans are doing now, I think we have plans and we have mechanisms in Europe. But as we are such, luckily, right, vivid democracies, we keep debating about things all the time. And I think if I'm not certain that red, ETS2 will come, how am I supposed to place a 20-year PPA with your company? Because if we're going to look whether or not it's going to be there or not, how am I supposed to take an economic decision to put a 20-year, bet on the price of fertilizer that I can get from you? So I need clear boundaries, and I need stability and determination around it. And I think what we're seeing now with the European Commission, now even putting in question, possibly diluting ETS2, I think that's the English term for it as well, right? I think that is part of the problem. We are creating uncertainties, and I cannot make a long-term plan around
Europe
that.
is creating uncertainty.
Yes. If we had a plan, we had a mechanism, and we're starting to dilute it, and we're starting to debate all about it all the time, like CO2 emissions of cars now, the end of ICE, internal combustion engines in Germany or in Europe, 2035. I mean, it's a massive debate, and we have some car makers that are saying, no, let's stick to it. We've made major investments in decarbonizing and EVs. Let's not, take it away, and others that are massively lobbying towards taking it away. And I am a clear supporter of let's keep the boundaries that we've set, because people have placed their bets, they've made their investments, and it would be unfair to take them away.
Don't create uncertainty. Natalia?
From the automotive perspective, I think one thing is important, and it is that what we need, for sure there are targets we need to fulfill. We are all committed to decarbonize, to achieve also the CO2 targets and so on, and we want to do it. That sustainability, we want to do it. But we have to be also conscious, and the EU Commission should be also conscious that, at least in our case, we, the automotive industry, we represent about 8-9% of the total GDP of the Europe area. So it means, I think no one of us is wanting to destroy an industry, because who is going then to find another industry that will fulfill this gap of the 8% of the GDP? So it means we need to look for alternatives, ways of doing whatever that make us possible to achieve the targets, but without destroying financially the companies.
So how do you see EU regulation? Does it create uncertainty for your sector as well?
Let's put it differently. So it makes it not easy to make the business sustainable. We all want to fulfill regulation and legislation. We are committed to do it, but the way for doing it is being so complex that generates, in the meanwhile, also a lot of uncertainty about the future of the companies and the industry itself.
Yeah. Philippe, you want to jump in?
No, I just wanted to be more blunt. I think that's created certainty of death for half of the European automakers. Because, at the end of the day, when you see that the Chinese are able to produce a car for 15,000 euros, and in Europe, so I speak under your control, it's what is the minimum price without the subsidies is 25. So what is the client going to do? Well, they buy Chinese. So, no, it's, to me, the problem is that you start with very good intention, and in French we say the hell is paved with good intentions. you have a lot of good intentions. You want to execute a very sound and user-friendly and planet-friendly policy, but you don't look at the real world. And you don't look at China. I think the problem is, okay, if it was a plain only among Europeans, then you can say some Europeans are going to win and some going to lose. It's fine. But you don't know that the Chinese have started 25 years ago to work on batteries, that they have already they have leapfrogged the Europeans, that they are very good at doing at scale. We are talking about scale. It's not only scale financing, it's scale producing. And the reason why Northvolt failed is because producing batteries at scale is difficult. There is a question of learning experience. You cannot buy time. No, you need to make your mistakes and improve. And it takes, that's why... You
can't buy time, that's a...
Yeah. So, so I think, the problem that we have with uncertainty or certainty, sometimes it is wrongly calibrated, and for some reason, nobody cares at the beginning in the higher echelons. Well, it was obvious, I taught that in my, so it's not that I'm clever, but 5 years ago, I taught that to my class. That at the end, I told my students, you see, they will cave. It is not possible to make such an important industry that the automotive sector die in Europe. And it was obvious that the Chinese would be better.
Can you repeat that again?
It is not possible that governments, local governments, would let, as you say, 5 to 10% of the workforce being unemployed, and in a sector that is so emotionally charged. That was the only sector with bank that Obama saved in 2008. It's 2009. It's for a reason. The 20th century is the century of automobile. Okay, so it is printed in us. Mm-hmm. So it is not going to, the governments are not going to let it disappear. So either they ban the Chinese car, mm-hmm. or they find a way for people to buy 25,000 euro cars, which I think is also impossible. Because if you have 5,000 euros subsidy multiplied by millions, I'll let you do the math. Doesn't work.
Philippe, thank you. I want to move back to you, José Antonio, and see, made in Europe fertilizers. Is Europe giving you the framework, the regulations to be successful? What kind of challenges are you seeing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's moving slowly, but I think they are on the right path. The European Parliament approved recently import duties on certain fertilizers to avoid dumping of prices, because short term it's very interesting to have access to these very accessible fertilizer, but long term the result will be that the industry will disappear and you don't know what you will pay once you have no industry. I think food industry in general is very strategic. I think every country has food industry. Not everyone makes cars, but it's very rare that a country does not have food industry or has no agriculture. So I think fertilizers are just as strategic as energy for Europe, and I think they are on the right path to try to protect the industry so that the industry can evolve. And I think long-term, the future of the industry is to electrify and decarbonize, because long-term, by sourcing natural gas, the industry will not be competitive. So I think the only path for incumbents, the existing industry and future newcomers, is to decarbonize and electrify the fertilizers.
Yeah.
Mika, you've been listening to all of this. How do you see policy and regulation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think very fantastic to hear your thoughts on the matter, seeing from your businesses, how you look at it. I think how we look at, we have a counterparty risk as well to who we sell electricity to. So we want to understand as well, if we're locked into that dance for 20 years or so, or probably a shorter time often, but we want to understand that how does the business work, and the way that especially when it comes to new projects, how we sometimes divide it is looking at which companies and the products have a regulatory demand and which ones have a real market demand. And those are it's not a beauty context, but contest, but it sort of helps entangle that what is a product that will fly even if the regulation starts going a bit unstable, haywire, or something starts to change, and which ones are mainly just reliant on the regulation. Let's say some blend mandates for ESAF, for example, where the business cases are quite difficult, sustainable aviation fuels, those to say, without the EU blend mandates. So that's number one. And I think then when it comes to sort of, we spoke about the pricings and sort of how to make homegrown materials, we've noticed that I think business cases that rely on a green premium are quite difficult at this point. It's a difficult sell. Are clients really willing to pay a premium for something that's clean or green? Potentially, if you have two identical products and the one is green and one is not green, perhaps then you'd like to choose the other one. But we've certainly seen some business cases where there's a fairly large assumption for a higher ability to charge for the product, and that's, I think, being challenged at the moment.
Thank you, Mika. Now, we are close to the end of our conference. We have just over 6 minutes. I want to go quickly round my panelists and ask that one thing in the next 3 years that you think could really just catapult, make the difference to speed up clean industrial electrification. Do watch that clock.
I do.
So
I'm thinking. I think sometimes we're simplifying some of the discussions we're having right on stage. But I feel what Michael Liebreich showed this morning, right? Electrotech is the way to go. We need to be determined to walk that path and walk as determined and as fast as possible. The planet doesn't care whether we change or whether we decarbonize or not. We should. And I think the key challenge is how do we do it so that we stay competitive from an industrial perspective? And that's a global question. And I feel what other way is there than to completely push the innovation agenda in the direction of electrotech? So I want to see us continue pushing that in the most determined way possible. Because I don't see how continuing to build internal combustion engine is going to do anything good to our cost competitiveness in the long run. I don't see that. So I want us to stay on the course and continue pushing the boundaries there. Okay. And I want all of you to continue pushing the boundaries there.
Thank you, Florian. Philippe, that one thing that's going to make a difference in the next 3 years.
I want an EU public agency that makes a plan for energy with funding and milestones and a strong governance so that it is accepted by all countries.
Thank you. Natalia.
Ladies and gentlemen, the parallel session, Powering Europe's Battery Future, will begin in 5 minutes in breakout room 1.
Thank you.
The parallel session, Powering Europe's Battery Future, will begin in 5 minutes in breakout room 1.
But you have to stay here until we finish. We're going to finish right now. Natalia, that one thing.
So, for me, electrification is for sure the future. We have to make it happen. We are on the good track, but we have a lot to do also in the upcoming 2, 3, 4 years. And probably in this near future, we need to review and to align a lot of stuff to first to decarbonize, to achieve the goals, but doing it on a sustainable way for all the industries.
Thank you.
I mean, from our side, I think it will be very important to keep access to affordable electricity, which includes a special case of electro-intensive industry. There are certain industries where really they're very dependent on what's the price of the electricity. There are certain incentives for the industry which needs to continue. And second is a stable regulation which makes sure also that this clean market develops, because at the end what we need is consumers willing to have decarbonized products, and I think this is also coming from a stable regulation to promote those markets. Yeah.
Thank you, José Antonio. Mika, final thoughts to close our panel. That one thing.
It's difficult when the points have, very good points have been made already, but I think real partnerships between end users, energy producers, off-takers, getting to the same room and discussing how to build these new projects together, because we don't do anything with just our power plants. We need to send it to someone. Someone needs electricity. We find together opportunities for flexibility, etc. So we need to. It sounds like that's the obvious answer, just to kind of get talking, but forming more partnerships. I think that's what I would like to see.
Wonderful. What a place to do it here, forming more partnerships. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give my guests a round of applause. Thank you. Excellent. Florian Reuter, Philippe Tibi, Natalia Turón, and also José Antonio Heras and Mika Korja. Thank you very much indeed. You've been wonderful. Thank you so much.